Okay, so we're good. You ready to turn it on? So everybody should be on already. Yeah, we're on. Hello everyone, and welcome to Partnering with Your Board with Michela Perrone. This is Chantel Simmons from the National Urban League. Good afternoon, good afternoon. So we're going to give it about 1 to 2 more minutes to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get on. And then I'm going to come back to the line. We are going to begin the webinar for this afternoon. Please give a space where you are able to mute your phone, able to get out a pen and a pencil, so a pen, I should say, and a piece of paper, that you are able to take notes. The webinar is scheduled for an hour. Michela will be presenting, and then we will have some time for some questions. You are going to be able to type your questions in the chat box so that they may be answered. Thank you to those who sent us their questions early, and Michela will be able to address those questions shortly. So again, we're going to wait about 1 more minute to begin our webinar for this afternoon, Partnering with Your Board. We're going to give it about 1 more moment.
Chantel, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. We said that we were going to try to get them to ask the questions verbally rather than writing them down.
Okay, so you want me to unmute them?
I would prefer that because instead we were going to ask them to be in a space where there was no background noise so that we can talk rather than just having them write out their questions.
Okay, I'm unmuting them now, so.
Okay, and let them know that.
There should be Sean, Ruben, James, and Glenton on the line. Hello?
Hi, everyone. This is James.
Okay, great. Hi, James. It's Chantel.
Hi, and I'm going to stay mute because I am in a place with a good bit of noise.
Okay, thank you. Just come off when you need to ask a question. Okay, so welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. The time is 2:05. So I just want to introduce Michela to you all so you know a little bit about her before she actually begins. Michela is the president of MMP Associates, which is a consulting firm supporting the successful development of nonprofit organizations, their boards, and chief executives. We've worked with Michela probably for the last 6 years with not only our new CEOs, but also our seasoned CEOs as well. She is a consultant and trainer for the Center for Nonprofit Advancement in Washington, D.C., and also a faculty member for the Executive Certificate Program at Georgetown University's Center for Public and Nonprofit Leadership. Michela was also the president of the Lieutenant Joseph P. Kennedy Institute, which is a nonprofit corporation with headquarters in Washington, D.C. So without further ado, I introduce you to Michela Perrone, who will be talking to us today about partnering with our boards. Michela?
Okay, I'm ready. And would you, I heard James introduce himself. Would the rest of you say who you are? And James, where are you geographically so that I have a general idea of your league's location?
Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
North Carolina, great. And who else is online?
Clinton, Ruben?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Yeah, this is Glenn from Orlando.
Glenn from Orlando. All right. Who else?
Ruben, Anthony, and Sean Bradley are also on the line.
Ruben, where are you?
I have to unmute them there. Oh, there we go. Sean unmuted finally.
Ruben Anthony, and Sean?
Yeah.
I'm here.
Ruben.
Okay. Ruben, Anthony, and Sean, where are you geographically?
So Ruben is from Madison, Wisconsin, and I think Sean, I heard Sean's voice.
Madison, Wisconsin. And Sean and Anthony, are you guys with us?
And that's Ruben. Ruben is his first and last name is Ruben Anthony. So it's just Sean.
Oh, Ruben Anthony. Okay, so it's
Yep.
just one person, Ruben Anthony.
Uh-huh.
So Sean is the last one. Sean, are you there?
He was the one that spoke, right?
I guess not. So we just have James, Glenn, Ruben, and Sean. These four.
Yes.
Gary Runner actually just jumped on. Gary, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, oh, there's major background noise. Where is that coming
That's
from?
Gary.
Who's that?
Gary, if you could just mute your end while we give the presentation, there's a lot of background noise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's much better. Okay, so you said Gary or Harry?
Sherry.
Sherry. Okay, Sherry. And Sherry, where are you?
I'm in Chicago.
Chicago. All right, the Windy City. So that's why we were getting all that noise. It was just wind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, can you all see the PowerPoint that you should have on your screen if you are watching at a screen? Otherwise, obviously we'll just talk it through. But can everybody see that? Okay. And I need to be able to move it, Melissa.
Yeah, you have control. You have control, Michela.
No, I don't. Oh, now it's finally arrived. No, I don't. It's not moving. I don't have control.
Did you see the message that came up? All right.
Click on it.
No.
You, the panelist, then you should see a message come up on your end.
Okay, now it is. Yes.
Okay.
You've been the presenter. Okay, now I'm ready. Show my screen. Okay. Showing the main screen. Okay. My screen. Because now I don't have the screen on anymore for some reason.
We'll go back.
Okay, let's see if the things come back up. Okay. Now, let me see if I can move it.
Whatever, I took control back, Michela, because for whatever reason you're not able to get control.
No, I'm not. And it was fine when we tried it.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was.
so now you're moving it. Okay, let me see if I can get control now. No, I still cannot.
No, because that's something I would have to give you. Why don't we just move through the presentation, and I'll just move the slides along as you go.
Okay, so then move to the next one.
Okay?
Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is give you an overview of the legal obligations of boards and the support obligations of boards, and try to cover some of your questions. A couple of you sent me questions about board orientation and fundraising primarily. So I'm going to include those, those two questions in our work together. I'll go through this pretty quickly. I think you know why nonprofit board exists. So we don't need to do that. That's why it would be nice if I could just go to the next one. But what I do want to cover is the legal obligations of the board, so that when you do, like, one of you had said we wanted to know about the legal obligations of boards. Well, these are what you see in your slide now are the legal obligations of board of directors of nonprofit organizations. They are supposed to determine the mission, direction, and strategies for the for your organization. And what that means is not that they are determining the mission aside from you. You are in a partnership with your board. The thing is, they need to be included in determining with you the strategic direction of where you want to go. Because if boards don't feel that they have a buy-in in that strategic direction, then it's much less likely that they're going to be your partner in raising the funds that are needed to implement that mission. So you kind of want to create a process whereby you work with them to make sure that they participate in prioritizing what you're going to do. What is the direction of the league in your community? What are the needs in your community that you're supposed to respond to? The reason why that is important is because the second legal obligation is to provide oversight. And if they don't decide with you what is the mission and what is the direction and what are the strategies and what are the goals, then it's hard for them to provide oversight. And sometimes what happens is that they end up micromanaging you and trying to guide the implementation of the mission and the direction rather than just providing the oversight. So you sort of have to, it's like a balance. You have to make sure that they understand that they are supposed to provide oversight, but that the questions that they ask and how they work with you to determine that the organization that you are moving in the right direction is by asking you questions that are related to the governance responsibilities, not the management authority that you have. So for example, when they provide oversight around the programs and the services that you provide, you want to have very clearly spelled out what are the outcomes around those programs, so that when they ask you questions related to programs, they're not asking you how you get to those outcomes, but they're just asking you, have you accomplished the outcome or not? So that's kind of an important piece of the legal obligations. Around the fiscal matters, what it basically means is that the board are responsible for approving the budget, for reviewing the actual, for meeting with and relating to the audit, making sure that the audit is in place and that the auditor sees them as the client and not you. They're supposed to evaluate you as the CEO or executive director, whatever your title is, and they're supposed to provide oversight around compliance with laws and regulations. And then the third thing that the board needs to do is ensure its own effectiveness. So you want to make sure that you have a group of people who see themselves responsible for their own effectiveness and not something that you are responsible for. So the next slides, Melissa, you can go pretty quickly to the next ones. And I just basically an outline of what I have just said. So we can just, I don't have to repeat myself. I think we can just go through the side, keep going. And then providing oversight around programs. And we can send these, if maybe we already have, send these slides to you so that you can have them for your own information as you. This is all part of answering the orientation question that you were kind enough to send out ahead of time. And then you just keep going. Oversight area 1, I've already talked about all of this. So you can just go through the fiscal and the executive director evaluation and the compliance. Let's stay for a minute on this slide now. That is the legal and regulatory compliance. It's really important for the board members to understand that they have to be comfortable with knowing that your league is in compliance with the laws and the regulations and the contractual requirements that are in your state, and of course the federal government as well. We don't want excuse me, we don't want for them to be surprised if some regulation was not fulfilled or some law was not abided by. So so you just want to make sure that at least once a year you share with them a list of all of the legal, regulatory, and contractual requirements that your urban league has in your community, and that you have met those requirements, so that, you know, basically people can sleep at night. If you have any questions or any comments or anything you'd like for me to delve into more precisely. Is everybody still there? Are we still connected?
I'm still here.
Okay. Anything? Any questions or comments?
Not so far.
Okay. Okay, what about everybody else? Everybody okay with this?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. All right, so let me just ask you, how do you plan to make sure that your board understands these oversight areas? What are some, in terms of your partnership with your board, what are some ways that you might choose to work with your board so that they understand and behave out of these particular legal obligations? Any ideas you want to share with each other?
This is Glenn. Could you say the question one more time? Like, how should the boards, so that way it's clear, and then, because I want to answer, but I don't want to give a wrong answer.
No, you're not, there's no wrong answers. Okay, so what I'm saying is that nobody has any questions about these legal obligations for the board. So my question to you is, how do you plan, what are you thinking you could do to make sure that your board members understand that these are their legal obligations? What are you going to do to make sure that as part of the orientation of board members, both the new ones and the existing one, that people understand this and live out of it?
So I would say being a former board member on other nonprofits, and then also serving on as an elected official for a school board, the biggest thing is communication, right? So I would say communication and transparency, and then providing information and letting them know that their role, the fiduciary responsibility they have from a governance standpoint, but understanding that my role is more of the day-to-day operations and just keeping them abreast of what's going on. And I think when you have that level of communication in place, people understand their role. I think where the breakdown in communication, that's when the roles get mixed up.
That's perfect. That's exactly right. And one of the things that, Melissa, go down, if you don't mind, and see what's coming up for them. Yeah. Right here.
That
No,
one? Okay.
let's stay. I'm going to stay in this blue one for a minute.
Okay.
Oh, no, well, this one and then talk a little bit about what Glenn was just saying. What's really important to make sure that you are on the same page. And, you know, you're new CEOs, which means you have the opportunity to really shape your relationship with your board from the very beginning so that we don't have any problems with then having to change the relationship as you become, you know, more ingrained in your job. The reason why it's really important for, you know, excuse me, for boards to understand this is because their authority, their decision-making authority is limited to these governance legal obligations and to what I have on the slide right now, which is their responsibility to manage their own structure and operation. Therefore, when they establish the outcomes, when they review the budget, when they make sure that they're asking you questions about compliance, when they do the legal things, they are the boss. When we move to the next set of slides, which are the moral obligations of the board members, and that's where they change their hat from being in charge to being supportive of you, then you are in charge. And I think that when you, if it's really important, and you know, I've done this for the National Urban League and for many affiliates of the league. It's really important that we clarify this from the very beginning so that the board members don't think that they can micromanage you in terms of operational, telling you what to do operationally, but we give them a role that is extremely important, which is to do the things that you know that we just talked about they would do. So, but if you can add to the orientation or to the partnership discussion or to the communication, as you were saying, Glenn, if you can add to it the difference between when they are in charge and when you are in charge. So they are in charge of managing their own structure and operations. They're also in charge of determining and supporting, you know, and making sure that the mission is still relevant to what you do, and then the other areas, you know, the evaluation of you, the fiscal oversight, and the compliance. But then when it's time to do the work, in other words, they're in charge of the what, the big strategies, but you're in charge of the how. So let's go to the next set of slides. Let me see where, if I can go quickly through right, thank you, the moral obligation to support. Okay, so what I'm saying is that that once the board understands that they are supposed, that's where they have their authority, then when they get down, when they do the moral obligations, you know, I always say, if boards don't fulfill their legal obligation, they might go to jail. But if they don't fulfill their moral obligation, they're not going to go to heaven. So it's important for them to do it. But what's very important in terms of your partnership and your relationship with them is the fact that they are doing these things. They are giving you advice. They are fundraising. We need to talk about fundraising a little bit more. They're volunteering. They are the ambassadors for the community, in the community, for the Urban League. They're advocates. They represent you in their own networks. When they do all of these things, particularly the advice and the fundraising and the volunteering, you are in charge. In other words, you are the boss at that point. And I think that sometimes we run up difficulties in terms of kind of little power struggles, because they think that because they are a board member, that they're in charge of everything. And if they give you advice about how to do something, then you have to do it. When in fact, they are only in charge when they ask you questions in the oversight category as to whether you've accomplished the goals that you and they have established together in the mission, direction, strategies component of the legal part of their responsibilities. So I think that's, you know, speaking again about orientation, I think if you can explain this to them clearly. You can show the PowerPoints. You can say, I've just gotten into a webinar, and this is what we learned from the best practices that are happening in the community. That will make your life, a lot easier. And also the way you communicate to them is important. In other words, don't give them things to respond to and decide that are operational. Keep those to yourself and just give them the information they need in order to ask the oversight questions. So that's in terms of who's the boss. How is that? Does that make sense to you? Is that pretty clear? Do we need to talk about it before we move on to the moral, all of the various functions and the fundraising? But what do you think about this separation of authority? And do you think you can pull it off in terms of having them agree with you that this is the governance model that you want to use?
So I think it makes sense, and it's very clear. I think the issue is when you have a board that hasn't had a CEO for a while. I think. Oh, somebody speaking?
Back noise, Glenn.
What? Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
Oh, so I was saying when you have a board that doesn't have a CEO for like 2 years, sometimes the roles can be blended, so it takes some time to get them back into the area where they need to be.
Yeah, you're making a very good point. If they have been the CEO, and that's a very interesting situation that many organizations find themselves in. When boards are the CEO, which it sounds like that was your situation, right? I mean, they had to do the work, right? They didn't have a staff person. Two things happen. One is that they get attached to the, to doing the work, and it's really hard for them to let go because they think that they were doing it better than you were doing it, or whatever. That's one thing. The other thing that happens, and I don't know, you can tell us about that as we go through, but the other thing that sometimes happens is that they are so tired and they have struggled so hard to keep the Urban League going in your community without a staff that they disappear. That, I've noticed that many times, they are still on the board, they still go to meetings, but they've checked out because they're so exhausted from having had to run the organization for all that time. So you have almost the two ends of the spectrum that you might have to manage. Some people who still want to run it, and therefore you have to be really gentle and explain to them that, they did their job, they found a new person, they found the money to hire the new person, and now you're there, and you know what you're doing, you're the professional, and you really would like their advice, but you're not going to follow their advice all the time. And then you have the other spectrum, which is people that are just saying, hey, I'm exhausted because I've been doing your job and my job, So I think that's just something to be aware that is definitely a challenge that you're going to be up against. The key is at some point, you want to move them toward letting you do your job because that's what they hired you for, and evaluating you on what you are responsible for doing, rather than evaluating you every day by thinking that by they are doing the advice, which I have there at the top of the main ways that boards support the organization, that by giving you the advice, it means they're telling you what to do. And to kind of gently, professionally, but firmly to say to them, this is my role. That's why I was saying, how do you do this? How do you present this without making it look like, you're trying to tell them what, not to do or whatever. But how do you present this in such a way that they will buy into this model now that they have a professional CEO on board? So you're right, it's going to take a while, but I think letting them know that you understand where they are, letting them know that you appreciate their commitment to the organization, and letting them know that they're still extremely valuable to you and to the league. I think, kind of boost their ego, but at the same time, give them something to do that is not management, because they need to respect the fact that you are the manager. You are the executor of the strategies and the mission of the organization. I don't know if that helps or if that's kind of where you are, but what do you think?
I actually agree. This is Sean in Denver. I think those are valuable points, and I actually agree.
Okay. All right. So on the support, can we move on to moving on the support? Because I also, I don't want to spend a lot of time on all of the support functions because I don't know how many of them are involved and how many of you need what they're involved in. The thing is, you're going to have to come up with that list. Let's keep going through the slides, Melissa. Maybe like in terms of the the giving advice. Let's just go through them pretty quickly, unless you want to spend some more time on it. But the advice, the advice part of their support responsibility is important because this is where we sometimes have the problems with authority and power struggles. It's because people think that advice means control. And you need to kind of help them understand that if they're giving you financial, legal advice, IT, whatever, that it's all helping you. And you can say to them, the word I sometimes use is that we want for board members to see themselves as consultants to you, not as your boss in the category of advice, because advice is not a legal obligation. Where they have the authority is at the legal obligation level. So you can see all of the areas. You probably have other areas, but that's basically, the key here is respect the fact that they may have expertise that you don't have and use them, but don't give them the authority to tell you how to use their advice. And try to do that in a gently and professional way. Sometimes it helps to bring in somebody from the outside. I know you have experts at the office, at the central office in the National Urban League, or somebody in your community who can come into your board and explain this so that they hear it from a third party, so that it doesn't look like you have a conflict of interest telling them to stay out of your hair, or you can do it yourselves with my PowerPoints and whatever. But the idea is that you don't want to turn them off, particularly if you are in the situation that you were saying earlier that they haven't had a CEO for.
No, because I know there's probably somebody on the call thinking, I got to fire some of these jokers. So how do you do that? And then in my case, I have bylaws that says that they don't attend a certain number of meetings, then they're replaced. So what is the most graceful way of, basically terminating a board member, especially if they don't follow the bylaws?
Okay. Yeah, good point. Yeah, there is several ways. Okay, so one way, which is the least problematic in terms of the relationship, because we're all whether we are in a large community like Chicago or a small community, we're all in small communities, and the word gets out, so we want to be politically astute in doing this. But the easiest thing is to make sure that you have term limits in your bylaws, so that if people complete their term, and term limits that are best practice are either 3 2-year terms or 2 3-year terms, but so that you have either every 2 years or every 3 years you have an opportunity to not renew the term. So that's one way to fire a board member, is to not renew their term if you have something in the bylaws. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Ruben Anthony. Hey, sorry, I wasn't able to get in the conversation for some reason earlier. I could hear you, but you couldn't hear me. But under no circumstance can we actually fire a board member. For the most part, you'd have to work with the chair, or you have to work with your bylaws so that they do something where they are eliminated. But under the way that our contracts are written, they're our boss. And we can't flat out.
Yeah, right, absolutely. I mean, these are just strategies that you can use you can't do anything yourself to fire a board member. You have to suggest processes that are used in order for a board member not to stay on the board. One of those processes is that if you have term limits in your bylaws, then one way is for the governance committee or the board development committee, whatever committee you have, or the nominating committee, whatever committee you have on the board who makes these decisions, that they need to stick to the bylaws. So that's one way to do it, is to just basically, instead of asking a board member to leave, you're basically not renewing their term, which is, part of the way you're structured legally. That's one way. The other way is that I really like to encourage board members to develop an individual board member involvement plan, which means that instead of starting with what the bylaws say, that we start with what each board member says they are interested in and want to and are committing themselves to do to support the Urban League in their community. If you can get that, and obviously following some of my advice, like, these are my legal obligations, this is what I plan to do. These are my moral obligations, this is how I plan to, this is the advice I can give, this is the volunteering I can do, this is the money I can raise. In other words, you start the process with a set of statements that the board member himself or herself are making that they can do. And then you have the board governance committee or the board development committee or the committee on the board. There's all kinds of words for this committee, but it's basically a committee that is put together to support the effectiveness of the board. So all of these individual plans go into that committee, and then that committee or the committee chair or the board chair, board president, depending what you call that person, depending on how you want to develop the accountability. But what you do then once a year or in the middle of the year, if the person is not doing anything that they are putting down in their individual engagement involvement plan, then somebody has to sit down with them in a very professional, very, very good way and say, well, maybe something has changed in your life. Maybe 6 months ago you thought you could do this and you haven't been able to do it. You thought you could come to the meetings, but you haven't come to any meetings, or however you want, and then say, would you like to take, is there something, did something happen in your life that doesn't allow you to be involved in the organization the way you said you would be? So that's again a way to put the onus on them to say, well, you know what, I thought I could do it, but I lost my job, or I thought I could do it, but I got ill, or I'm struggling, or whatever it is that they say, so that they are the ones that are the first ones to say, well, I'll just go on an advisory group. The key here is that your board members have the personal, fiduciary, legal obligation to support the organization, to raise money for it, to provide oversight, to determine the mission. If they don't do it, then we need to figure out a way to help them get an easy out. The other, and usually in terms of calling somebody on why they're not participating, why they're not active, it should be done by somebody whom they trust, whom they respect, so that it's not a negative thing for anybody, but it's just, maybe I'm realizing that something has happened in my life and I cannot continue to do it. And you know all of this now, so you're supporting this process. You're not doing it yourselves. You can't fire your boss. You are just working with the board development committee or the committee on the board or the governance committee, whatever you call it. You work with them with that group of people, or maybe it's the executive committee that does it. You have to have a group of people on the board who feel that they are responsible for managing themselves. That's why, we had that in the other PowerPoint where we had at the end, they're responsible for their own effectiveness as a board. So you're just being the consultant to them at this point and say, these are some best practices, processes that we can use in order to make sure that board members who are not involved, who are not engaged, who are not doing what we are saying they should do. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to go over the legal obligations of the individual board members. And if you use these to go through with them, then you have yet another tool to make sure that you can keep on the board only the board members who are the most effective, and that you ask others not to be on the board anymore. Now, if you have another group, like an advisory council or a leadership council or a commission or some other group that you want to create that doesn't have the personal fiduciary responsibility for you, but it's more in an advisory capacity, then you can say to somebody, well, we have this other group, maybe it's a fundraising group that raises money for us, but you don't have to come to meetings, you don't have to do the things that our board has to do. Then you can ask them gently to go serve on this other group. So those are really basically the three ways. One is your term is up and it's not getting renewed because the term is up, so that's very objective. Two, you have said to us and to each other as a group of board members that you were doing all of these things, and for some reason your life has changed and you can't do them anymore. So maybe you can do something else to help us, but we're not asking you to take responsibility for us. And the third one is we would like for you to serve on another board. This board is engaged in things that you may or may not have the time or the capability to do. That's really the only way, because anything like voting you out of the board in a board meeting, anything that's hostile or negative or controversial, it's going to bite back for you. And I always recommend against a big standoff where people yell at each other and kick each other out. That's not going to work. I think one of these three things ought to be able to help you professionally and gently but firmly get rid of board members who are not pulling their weight. Does that help?
Help me.
Okay, so Melissa, let's move through the areas of advice. Let's go to not the advice of keep going. Okay, let's stay for a minute with the fundraising. This is the second area for advice. Where and you had those of you that answered my questions about what you had questions on, many of them were related to fundraising. The key for the fundraising thing is that we can't put fundraising or ensuring that financial resources are there. We can't put that under legal obligations because it is not a legal obligation. Board members cannot go to jail if they don't raise money for you. So we have to put it into a different category of obligation for them. And I think, Melissa, let's go to the okay. Let's just go quickly through this PowerPoint and then go to the legal duties, and then I'm going to come back to this area too. So can we just go to the PDF document?
I'm pulling it up now.
Yeah, thank you. Because we only have 10 more minutes. Okay, so do you see this legal duties of board members, the duty of care, loyalty, and obedience? Are you all familiar with this?
Yes.
What? Yeah, okay. So this is, you're familiar with the duties, so I'm not going to waste your time explaining the duties to you. What I want to do is give you a tool and a process and a system that you can use to use the legal duties to help with fundraising, okay? Because that's the only way that I have found that I've been able to connect the obligation to raise money and to sustain the organization with their doing it or not doing it or whatever. So it falls under the duty of care. What you can do if, you know, either you or some board development expert in your community that you find or whatever, the three duties these are legal duties. This is as legal as the initial governance responsibilities that we talked about. And actually in this document, which you either have or we will send it to you, there are some cases where board members actually got taken to court because they did not follow one of these three duties. So this is real. The duty of care, what boards have done that I've enjoyed and I have found effective under the duty of care is that you actually have a little bit of a workshop, or at a board meeting, you figure out, you facilitate, or you have one of your board members facilitate a process where you ask the board members to list under the duty of care what are the activities and the behaviors that they expect of each other in order to fulfill the duty of care. So for example, I put things like attendance at board and committee meetings, or being prepared for meetings, or use your independent and best judgment. So those are just some examples that usually come up when we ask that question. What you can put in there under the duty of care is that because the duty of care means that you have to be caring and you have to be careful about the organization, to express the duty of care, often board members say, well, that's where our fundraising legal obligation comes up. Because if I care about the organization, I'm not going to let it go under. If I care about the Urban League of the Chicago Urban League, I'm not going to let it collapse. So I'm going to do whatever I can. And so they themselves put under the duty of care, like come to meetings, you know, and come prepared at meetings and participate actively in meetings and be polite with each other and be civil to each other and raise money. And they actually have a conversation around whether they want to have some amount that every board member is responsible for, or if they don't want to have the amount, that they are going to decide as a group how much money does the board raise in, you know, that is in addition to what the staff raises. In other words, this is the moment where you have the opportunity, if you find somebody on the board who agrees with you, to say this becomes under the duty of care, which is a legal duty of an individual board member. Under the duty of care comes the fundraising involvement. And then once you have this, once the whole group has decided that, then you can ask the individual board members to do that individual board involvement plan, where they actually put in their plan, the way I'm going to fulfill my duty of care is that I will raise this much money, or I will open doors, or I will get you in touch with, I will get the staff in touch with some donors, or I will go with you to call on donors to, you know, to give us some money. Whatever are the fundraising strategies that you already have in place, or I know foundations in town, in our county, in our region that fund, you know, your employment programs or your IT training programs or whatever, and I will open that door and I will bring you with me when I go ask them, or I will open the door, I will go with you, but I won't ask. I want you to ask. In other words, you then ask them, how are you going to fulfill the duty of care? That's the only way that I have found that has been able to link a legal obligation to fundraising. Everything else, it depends on how persuasive and motivational you are and other board members are in determining the importance of their involvement in raising money for the organization. Okay, so give me some feedback on this one, whether you think it might work.
I think it's a good tool, you know, for getting a commitment, you know, from your board members about what they're actually going to deliver in the fundraising area. You know, we actually set up strategic goals for our board members, and we kind of charge our chair of our board to create these types of expectations that they're going to go out and help raise money, or they're going to agree to a certain amount of money that they're going to bring in from selling tickets or doing something. So we're already in this space where, you know, we create the expectation that you're going to open up a door some kind of way.
Mm-hmm. And what I have found is that individuals work better when they feel that they have created their expectation for themselves rather than responding to an expectation that you or somebody else has created for them. So that if you can have a little workshop and say, you know, we know that we have a conflict of interest, you know, we shouldn't have conflict of interest, or we should deal with them. We have to be, you know, the duty of obedience, which is the third one there, is, you know, is the one of being obedient to the board and being obedient to the mission of the organization. In other words, being coherent and consistent with, you know, with that. We know we have these three duties. How we fulfill those duties, let's do a little workshop during one of the board meetings. Let's come up with a list. If you can get them to come up with a list, like what you said, that we think that in order for us to fulfill the duty of care, we are responsible for caring for the organization by raising this much money, you will find that they will do it, that they are more likely to actually do it, rather than just being on the receiving end of somebody that tells them, here, that's what you're supposed to do. Now, of course, the other piece of this is that when you orient new board members, it's always the most effective thing to do is to make sure that before they say they're serving on your board, that they know that there is a expectation that was developed by their predecessors in a workshop, in a retreat, in whenever you do it, that we have an expectation. If you're on this board, you're supposed to either raise $10,000 a year or give $10,000 a year, or whatever is the amount. So that because it's very hard to get board members to agree to raise money if they did not know that was an obligation that was put on them in advance. In other words, they have to know in advance that this is what's expected of them, so that they can say, whoops, that's not the kind of board I can serve on because I don't have time, or I don't have the resources, I don't have the connection, I don't have the network, whatever. So because it's almost impossible to get people to shift from, if they think they're going on the board just to sit and go to meetings, every other month and bless your work and go home and have had a nice dinner, then we can't get them to turn around and say, oh, by the way, you also have to raise or give this much money. But if they know up front, then at least they know what they're signing up for. Now, one of the ways that they would know up front would be that the board would have already decided that under the discussion, under the duty of care. And then once, because the behaviors that are required of people under care, loyalty, and obedience should be written out and should be part of your orientation pre-coming to the board and post-coming on the board, that the board development committee would organize. So this would all be clear. Like what you were saying, you're already doing this, So then the accountability piece comes in what we said earlier under talking about how do you fire a board member, is the accountability piece comes is if you're putting together your individual involvement plan once a year, and those plans go into either the executive committee, you are also part of all committees because you are an ex officio member of every committee, so you can see those, and then nothing happens on the basis of what they say they're going to do, then you have a tool to hold them accountable. You have a way to go back to them and say, you said you were going to do this tell us what happened, how can we support you differently, did something change in your life and we need to change your plan, so that, because if people don't feel that they're going to be held accountable for what they say they're going to do, it's more likely that they are not going to be as diligent as you would want for them to be to fulfill that commitment. But if they know they're going to be held accountable, somebody's going to ask them, then they're more likely to actually do it. So what do you think this is an easy thing to implement, or a hard thing to implement, or what is your thinking around all of this in terms of being a new CEO?
A lot of it I have experience from being on boards of directors, but I do think that starting out with new directors from the beginning, and sharing that their colleagues have established some benchmarks or expectations, and that coming on the board means that you have to go out and help get the money. Doing that right from the beginning, I think, is great advice. Yeah.
Good.
So,
good.
But one of the things that you mentioned indirectly was ex officio membership, on each committee. So what does that mean? Does that mean that you should be a non-voting member on committees, or a voting member?
Okay, so let me just tell you one thing about voting. It doesn't matter legally who the voting only counts for the board meetings. In terms of legally, the only decisions that, governance decisions and legal decisions and decisions that hold, the only decisions that actually hold for a board are decisions that are made by the board as a whole. So the committees don't have any legal authority or governance authority. So you don't have to vote at a committee. Now, if a committee wants to know how the committee members feel about something, they can get a show of hand, or they can ask. But legally, the voting is a legal manifestation of the decisions that the board makes, and therefore so you can do that at the board meeting. Now, at committee, and committees don't have any authority to make any decisions. They only have the authority to recommend to the board if a decision has to be made. So you can, but it doesn't, so and by ex officio, what it means is that, officio is the Latin word for office, meaning the responsibilities, kind of what your office is. You're the CEO. So you are a member of every committee. And by saying ex officio, what is meant is that you don't have to go to all of the committee meetings, and the other person who is an ex officio member of every committee is your board chair or your board president. So what it means is that you can go to the committee meetings and be part of it, but you don't have to. Whereby if you're a committee member, you're expected to attend. Like under the duty of care, you would say if you're like what I gave it to you as an example, you attend the committee and the board meetings, that kind of thing. So all it means is that, go ahead.
I was asking the question too about voting, even on the even at the board meeting. Should the CEO be voting or not? Okay,
that's a good question. There is a trend right now among the 1.5 million nonprofit boards and nonprofit organizations in the United States, which is an awful lot, to have the CEO be a voting board member. It's a trend that has shifted upward between roughly 6% about 20 years ago to around 12% now. So it's shifting upward, but it's a very slow shifting upward. So there are some boards who want their CEO to be a voting board member. And the reason why they say that is because what they're saying is, if you're not a voting board member, if you are an ex officio member that attends the meetings, then you don't have any legal personal responsibility for the organization. So if something happens that is bad and you get sued or there are problems, the voting board members are the ones that are getting sued, and the people who are not voting board members are excluded from lawsuits. So what some board members are saying is, why should the CEO who is implementing the policies and the direction of the organization, why shouldn't he or she be personally responsible for what happens just like we are? So that's their rationale. So if you are a voting board member, then you are responsible. If you are not, if you are not a board member, if you are just the CEO who's going to the board meetings and supporting them, then you're obviously helping the board be effective, but you are not responsible personally for any decisions, good or bad, that the board makes. So the trend is going up, but it's still very, as you can tell, 12% is not very much, so you can see that it's a slow moving train that gives the CEOs the responsibility of being a full-blown board member who votes. Now, whenever people say, well, I have a concern, they shouldn't vote, what you have to remember is that it's not damaging or hurting or taking away any power from the board, because if you have a board of 12 people, 15 people, 20 people, 10 people, whatever, you still just have one vote. You know what I'm saying? It's not that you're going to control the board just by voting. So that's a discussion that boards have, and some boards go one way and some boards go the other way. So it's up to it's up to what the board wants. But you are, as a CEO, you are, and by the reason why I'm saying ex officio, it means it's from your office of CEO. You are entitled to be part of every committee. Now, if you have a staff that is large enough to have a CFO, a chief development officer, a fundraiser, a program officer, if you have a team of senior leaders, usually what CEOs do is that they say, okay, you are the CDO, the chief development officer, you staff the fundraising committee. You are the chief financial officer, you staff the finance committee. So you don't have to go to all of these committee meetings. But if you're the only one, then you probably should go to all the committee meetings, because I wouldn't let until you are really comfortable with the strength and positions and thinking of your board, I wouldn't let volunteers go off on tangents and not know what they're talking about, because then they're presenting something to the board and you don't know what that is. So I would really, I know it's a lot of work, but I would not let that go. I would go to those meetings if you don't have staff persons that can go to them.
Does
that make sense? Yes.
Yes. Quick question is two things on that train of thought. Knowing that, where you said that board members who are actually, CEOs who are actually board members, are there any trends seeing that the actual CEO served as chairman of the board? That's question number one. And question number two is, by definition of the role of the president and CEO, do you see people amending their bylaws and eliminating the secretary position, knowing that the CEO, the president and CEO is the executive secretary of the organization?
Okay, I did not hear, you're sort of going in and out. I didn't hear the first question. Let me answer the second one because I heard that one. There is a difference between officers of the board and officers of the corporation. You could be the president of the corporation, which is incorporated in your state, and a volunteer person could be the chair of the board. Or you could be the secretary of the corporation, and then somebody else on the board could be the secretary to the board. So you don't have to combine those two titles in one person if you don't want to. So what goes in the bylaws, what should be clear, like when you file your yearly or biannual reports into your state as a not-for-profit, they usually ask you for the president of the corporation and 2 officers. You could decide, the board could decide what of those roles they want you to play. Needs to decide who holds those offices for the board. Sometimes boards and corporations link those two offices into one, and then you would be you would be the president of the corporation, but you cannot be the president of the board. You have to have the chair of the board, which is a different person. Otherwise, you have no checks and balances. Sometimes the treasurer of the corporation and the secretary of the corporation is also the treasurer and the secretary of the board, and that's up to you all to decide. So you can be the not take the minutes, not do the more logistical secretarial work, but be the person who validates that the minutes actually reflect the decisions that the board has made. So that's kind of where I see all of those positions. It's probably a longer discussion that we have time to do here, but I'm happy to chat with you offline if it's important to you right now. But does that make sense in terms of how I'm answering your second question?
Yes.
And what was your first question? Because I only heard half of it.
You answered it, so it's okay.
Oh, that's good. I answered the question I didn't hear, so that's good. Okay, so I don't know if Chantel or Melissa are still on the line. How much more time do we have on
We
the
are
webinar?
still. I am still on the line, actually, Michela. So if you want to begin to wrap up for questions, we have about 5 more minutes. This call, I think, was actually scheduled to 3:30. So you have a couple more minutes, I should say, because it's actually 3:10 now.
Okay, good. So why don't we just see what's on your mind in terms of questions so that you can leave this with some value added rather than just, confusion or whatever. Anything else that you'd like to chat about?
Will we get copies of the presentation and also the list of duties that you just shared?
Yeah, Chantel, can you forward to them the stuff I forwarded to you? I thought we had already done that.
No, I didn't. I forwarded them the article, Michela. I didn't forward them the deck or the legal duties of board members with cases. So if you're okay with me sending it, I can.
Oh, absolutely. Very much want for them to have it because maybe they can use it. Maybe you can share it with your board chair and see whether they would like to spend some time talking about this at one of the meetings, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. That would be great if you could send it to them because I don't have their emails.
Sure, I can send it.
Great. Anything else?
I don't have any more questions. I think you did a nice job giving a great overview.
Great. Well, that's great. I mean, the challenge is in making it all happen. It's easy for us to talk about it on Thursday afternoon, right? The challenge is making it all happen. So, but I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
Is there anything else from somebody who hasn't said anything?
No, I think I'm good as well. Thanks for doing the presentation and staying online and being patient with everyone with their questions and stuff. So appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Terry?
No questions for me.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Chantel, it looks like we're good.
Okay, so before you all go, thank you so much, Michela, for facilitating this webinar for us today. Before you all go, can everybody just chime in? I sort of know your voices, but if you could just say your name and just let me know whether or not you have plans on coming to LPC at this point. I will let you know for sure by the end of next week if we're going to have an additional session for new CEOs at LPC this year. But I was just curious just to take an informal poll on who is planning on attending our legislative policy conference in May?
Ruben Anthony from Madison, already registered, already got the flight. Be there.
Okay, thank you.
Sean Bradley from Denver, same thing.
Okay.
Sean Bradley from Denver, same thing.
Okay.
I'll be there.
Sherry Runner from Chicago. I will be there, but I'm not going to be there until the 17th.
Okay. Thank you.
James Perry, Winston-Salem, I'll be there.
Okay. Okay, so that's, oh, Glenn, are you coming?
Yeah, I will.
Working on it?
Finalizing the details.
All righty, thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this Thursday afternoon on our first webinar for our new CEOs of this year. Thank you so much, and you all have a great afternoon, and I will connect with you no later than next week. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.